out and everything, but I do want to add Rick Orman is going to have 2 stents put in tomorrow at 2 o'clock. He's got 2 arteries that are 95% occluded, and so it's a wonder he didn't have a heart attack. So anyway, you need to remember them, keep them in our prayers. Other than that, just the standard people. Sherry Vermillion, if you don't know about her, they actually had to put tubes in both legs and everything. They removed the tubes, but she has an infection in her toes now, so she's getting treated for that. She's still in a lot of pain, but she is gradually getting better, so please do remember her. And I wonder where your dad is. Huh?
They're out of town.
Why did they go out of town?
He said he told the elders.
He didn't tell me. If he'd told me, I'd have told him he couldn't go. That's probably why he didn't tell me.
I told him to go.
You
All
told
right.
him to go. That's his daughter.
So I just want you to know, I can always tell when someone is lying. But I can also always tell when someone is standing.
Okay.
Let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Our most loving Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this privilege we have to be able to assemble together to encourage one another and to be able to study your word without fear of persecution. We're thankful for your love and your patience with each and every one of us. We're thankful for your Son, Jesus, who willingly sacrificed his life for the sins of the world and for our sins. We're thankful for your word, Father, and we ask that you would be with us as we continue to study the book of Job, that we might have a full understanding of how it applies to us. We recognize, Father, that we have several members that's not able to be here because of sickness and poor health, and we ask that you would be with them, that they might be restored to their health as soon as possible, that they can continue to serve you as you would have them do so. And we ask also, Father, that you'd be with our elderly members. We have some that are not able to get out due to age and poor health, and we ask that you would be with them and use us as instruments that we might reach out and help them in any way that we can. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen. I might also mention Dan Cross is still recovering from his shoulder surgery, and so want to continue to. Yes, he did. Yeah. So, but I think he'll be a lot better off once all the soreness and pain is alleviated. Yeah. So, chapter 20, we're going to begin that. And you would have thought that after Job made the statements he made, his statements of faith towards the end of chapter 19, that these 3 friends would let him alone. But that's not the case. In fact, now we're going to look at Zophar. And Zophar's speech appears long, but it's a very simple speech, okay? But on the other hand, though, what happens here is Zophar's response is heated to Job's words. They just won't let him relax. So we're going to look at the first few verses, and let's just read chapter 20, and we'll begin at verse 1, and we'll read down through verse 3 right now. It says, Then Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, Therefore my anxious thoughts make me answer, because of the turmoil within me. I have heard the rebuke that reproaches me, and the spirit of my understanding causes me to answer. You can see right off that Zophar is, he's got those daggers shooting out of his eyes and everything. He is so angry. And because these 3 friends feel like Job is not listening to them. And so he's going to make some comments here. He responds heatedly in verse 2, being resolved to condemn Job for a bad man. He was much displeased, obviously, that he talked like a good man. And so Job is going to attack him. Verse 3, Job had given him strong provocation, is what he's saying here basically. He cannot bear to hear Job's comments any longer. And so Zophar says, I have understanding. It's what motivates me to speak. That his own heart gave him a strong instigation. His thoughts caused him to answer, for out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. So it is important to understand that and consider a matter thoroughly before discussing it. However, whether this was done in Zophar's case is uncertain. He really didn't think about what Job was saying. So look at verses 4 and 5 here. He says, Do you not know this of old? Since man was placed on earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite is but for a moment. So Zophar asserts the misery not only of those who are openly wicked and profane, but of hypocrites who secretly practice wickedness under a show and profession of religion. He grants that wicked men may for a time prosper, may be secure and easy. And he says, you may see them triumphing and rejoicing in their wealth and power, their grandeur and their success. Their happiness, though, is fleeting and will soon give way to perpetual sorrow. So then in verses 6 and 7, Zophar says, though his haughtiness mounts up to the heavens, and his head reaches to the clouds, yet he will perish forever like his own refuge. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? So Zophar at this point is plainly shows the destruction of wicked people, implying that Job's ruin proves his wickedness and his hypocrisy. However great you become in this life, your end is like dung or refuse. So it is not his wisdom and virtue, but his worldly wealth or greatness that accounts for his excellency. He is confident that his ruin will be very great, and his fall the more dreadful for his having risen so high. So at this point, Zophar is very heated in his argument with Job. Any comments through verse 7? Nola?
Sound like he knows everything. He just seems to have the idea that he has the answer to Job's problems.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it briefly once before, but you can only imagine that these three friends, as they were coming, and I don't know the distance that they were traveling just to come to Job. Initially, they had compassion for him. They were consoling him. But you can only imagine that as they were coming and everything, because the idea was that if someone is suffering like Job is, he has to be sinning. And so they conspired among themselves as to what they were going to say when they got there after they comforted and consoled Job. Now they're going to attack him and say, look, you're a sinner. You need to repent. And at this point, Job is not doing that. He's not acknowledging that. And so this is upsetting him to a great deal. And all three of the friends pretty much have the same thing to say. They say it, Job doesn't respond, so now they get angrier about it, get hostile towards Job. Any other thoughts? Yes, David?
That's a clear case of the three of them getting in cahoots with one another and coming up with the same story.
Yeah, pretty much so. That's why I say probably if they were traveling, they conspired with each other. This is what we're going to say. Because when you look at each chapter, there's very similar comments that they're making towards Job.
Plus, you can see that arrogance among the three of them.
Yeah. Any other comments? All right, look at let's go to verses 8 and 9 here. Zophar says he will fly away like a dream and not be found. Yes, he will be chased away like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place behold him any more. So, Zophar's basically saying, look, your destruction is going to be swift. And because of that, nobody's going to remember you. He says, the eye that saw him and was ready to adore him shall see him no more. And the place he filled shall no longer behold him, having giving him an eternal farewell when he went to his own place. Think about Judas. In Acts, the first chapter, verse 25, Judas, as we know the story, by transgression fell, that he might go to his own place. Judas could have easily repented of the sin that he committed, but he did not do that. His guilt was so strong that he went out and hung himself. And all we have in remembrance of Judah is the potter's field, isn't it? So this is what Zophar is basically saying to Job, is you're going to suffer the same consequences. Your destruction is going to be so swift that nobody's going to remember you. Any comments? All right, so the next section of it is he's going to talk about the miserable condition of the wicked man in this world in verses 10 through 22. All right? So what he's talking about here is the instances here given of the miserable condition are expressed with great fullness and fluency of language. In verse 10, he says, his children will ask or seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will restore his wealth. Now, Zophar says his hands will give back his wealth, implying he didn't rightfully own this wealth that he had in the first place. Even though he's lost it all and everything, he didn't rightfully own it. Okay, so it's going to be given back. They shall be reduced to the lowest degree of poverty and want. They will become servants to the poor. Verse 11, he says, his bones are full of his youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in the dust. So Zophar is basically saying he is cut off before his time, before living a full life. And many folks experience that. I saw an email message from Mike Bowen the other day. Now, Mike's not an old individual. I don't know how old he is. I'm guessing he's probably in his 50s. And he was talking about the fact that one of his classmates passed away. Well, that's a very young age to pass away. We don't know when we're going to pass away, but we will pass away. And so when that happens, obviously we're cut off before our time because we want to live for a much longer period of time. Every one of us had that kind of desire to live here on this face of the earth. But the faithful Christian recognizes that someday we're going to leave this earth. And when we do, we have something much better to look forward to. So fear does not cause any faithful Christian to dread death. Faithful Christians look forward to death. That's the same as the Apostle Paul when he said, I have kept up the faith and I've fought a good fight. We should be able to say that as well. But we might be cut off early in our lifetime. And if we are, so be it. Look at verses 12 through 15. He says, though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue, though he spares it and does not forsake it, but still keeps it in his mouth, yet his food in his stomach turns sour. It becomes cobra venom within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. Zophar is basically saying the wicked man holds on to evil with his own words and greedily swallows riches. And again, he emphasized the point that these riches don't belong to him. he excessively indulges in carnal pleasures, finding them the most gratifying. The gall of serpents, he mentions the cobra's venom, is full of poison, which from thence is conveyed to their mouths by veins, and the poison of apes or cobra is most dangerous, and within a few hours kills the individual. So he emphasized again his ill-gotten goods, which he devoured with so much, God himself shall violently force them from him, and all his other riches as well. Any comments through verse 15?
Sound like a friend I'd like to have.
No. Well, that goes back to what was chapter 16 where Job basically says, I need more friends, I need better friends. Yes. Arthel.
No, I agree with Isaac, because my question is what does this have to do with my condition? You know, it's like you're like you said, you're doing more harm than help right now. You know, because like I said, because it's like clearly they should have known that Job was an honest man, and that the things that he gained was out of his own, out of his own hands. It's not like he was trying to cheat anybody or was trying to, deal with anybody treacherously. It's like I said again, what does that have to do with my certain condition right now?
Well, and that's a good question, good comment. But we have to keep in mind that what these three friends are trying to do is trying to get Job to admit that he sinned and ask for forgiveness. And Job is not willing to do that. Yes, he does question God. But Job feels that he is a God-fearing man, that he is faithful. And these three friends don't understand that because he's not listening to them. And so they're getting more and more hostile towards him.
Why don't they get the message?
Huh?
Why can't they get the message that he wants to listen to?
Well, and that's a good question, but I think it goes back to, you look at the Old Testament, you look even in the New Testament. I mean, they still felt that when people suffered the way that they're suffering, that they sinned. We've talked about it before, but remember when the disciples asked Jesus, who sinned? This man who was lame from birth, who sinned? This man or his parents? And you go to Psalm 51, verse 11, I think it is, where David says, I was born in iniquity. And so you look at some religions that suggest that this is why we need to baptize infants and everything, because they're sinners from the birth. Which that's not the case. They misunderstand that verse. They need to read the whole thing and have a full understanding of what's being said there. But we have a lot of things that take place today in the world of religion. I saw the other day the comment was that seems like, I think maybe it was President Trump that might have even made the comment that seems like the different religions are increasing significantly in population because young people are wanting to get back to serving God. But yet we see all the evil in the world. Well, that's what these people are suggesting here, is because of the evil in the world, you have sinned. And so let's look at verse 16. We'll read a couple of verses here.
Hey, Dale,
Yes.
what I was going to say is when you think about Luke 6, when he says out of the abundance of the heart that they speak, well, it says more about the person speaking than it says about Job.
That's true.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
And I always find that interesting because all this time they've been around him and they've been going back and forth, and this is what he really thinks.
Yeah.
So all this time you don't know what people really think about you. You just know them by their fruits and by their actions, not by what they say. But
Well, that's-
he's saying what he thinks.
Yeah, that's a very good point and everything. I mean, I had to go up to P&K John Deere the other day to get a new belt for the 0 degree mower. And I was making comments, like the joke I made before class and everything, that I can always tell when someone's lying, but I can also always tell when someone is standing. And the salesman there, he says, I have a lot of friends, and you're one of them. So, and you folks are one of my friends too. But, no, Kathy, you make a good point here. And that's the problem. These three friends don't even see their own problem. They don't even see that they're wrong in what they're trying to say here.
Well, even if they were right.
Well, that's
Even
true.
if they were right,
Yeah,
they're wrong.
true. Because they're going about it the wrong way.
That's right.
So, good point, Kathy. I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's go to verse 16. We'll read a couple of verses here. Says, Zophar says, he will suck the poison of cobras. The viper's tongue will slay him. He will not see the streams, the rivers flowing with honey and cream. He will restore that for which he labored, and will not swallow it down from the proceeds of business. He will get no enjoyment. For he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently seized a house which he did not build. You see, he's not talking in the first person here, and he's not saying Job here. He's using pronouns here that talks about an evil individual. And basically relating this to Job. For example, he's basically saying in verse 16, you might die from a snake. And Zophar would see it fitting, since he accused Job of hiding evil under his tongue, which is the venom of cobras. And he goes on to talk about the fact that his ill-gotten riches shall prove as great and deadly as torture. As if when he squeezed the poor, he had sucked the poison of apes or been bitten by the viper. He won't see the wonderful things God made because of his evil condition. He will hand over what he has made because he may endeavor again with new labor to repair his broken fortune. But it shall all be in vain, is what Zophar is saying here. You look at verse 19, he says, for he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently seized a house which he did not build. So he's basically accusing people like Job to be an individual that he basically stole everything he has. He didn't earn it. It didn't belong to him. He got it by oppressing the poor. You see that situation taking place today. Socialism. Now, I'm not going to get into politics and everything, but that seems to be increasing, I'll put it this way, here in the United States. And I'll give one example of what socialism can do. People who own apartment buildings in New York City, they have been told that they cannot evict anyone for not paying rent. Well, what does that mean? It means that they don't have to pay rent. If they don't pay rent, what happens? The people who own the apartment buildings can't keep them repaired. If they can't keep them repaired, what happens? The government seizes those apartment buildings. They now become government facilities. And that's what socialism does. It takes from the rich and gives to the poor. This is why they stress Medicare for everybody. And basically this is what Zophar is accusing Job of. You got all these riches and everything, but you didn't deserve them. You stole them from the poor. Well, just because an individual is wealthy does not mean that they took it from the poor.
Usually help the poor.
Huh?
If it weren't for the rich people, the poor couldn't make it.
That's right. That's right. It actually,
Sounds like sour grapes. It sounds like someone who has been envious all this time.
yeah.
And he's got to strike out and let this guy know.
He's been a spoiled kid all his life. But he believes in taking away everything and giving to everybody else. Well, he just wants some popularity.
Yeah. Kathy?
I was just saying, don't you think they're prescribing to what Satan said when he was talking to God? He said, well, you put this hedge around him and you protected him and you've done all this for him. And so as long as they felt like that he was being protected by God, they didn't say anything or they didn't speak up, but now's their chance.
Yeah.
So now they're saying what they really think.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yes, Pat?
The other thing is they're speaking in generalities and not giving any kind of an example of what Job did of any of these accusations that they're making.
Right. Yeah, nothing is ever made about the fact that Job, with all his riches and everything, took care of the poor. They're basically saying, no, you're not taking care of the poor, you stole from the poor. Bevan?
So whenever God gives all this back to him, are they gonna say that he, repented, or how are they gonna accept that?
Well,
And he gets it back?
He's not broke.
yeah, we'll have to stay tuned for that.
Okay, I got the invoice first,
I feel like that they're trying to compare Job to like how Jesus dealt with the rich young ruler. Because remember what Jesus told the rich young ruler: sell all that you have and give to the poor. But the rich young ruler went away sorrowful because it shows that he wasn't willing to give. Well, and I guess that's why I've noticed that there is a difference of people who are rich versus being wealthy. Because when I think, doesn't it also say about in the book of Acts about Cornelius, that he was generous, that he gave alms to the people? Mm-hmm. And it also correlates with 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 and 7. If you give a little, you're going to receive a little. If you give a lot, you're going to receive a lot. I've seen and witnessed, between family members, friends, you can tell the people, like you said, who are wealthy, but yet they're still generous to those who are still less fortunate, versus those, it's like that saying, if you keep your fist tight, nothing comes in, nothing goes out. In other words, you're like the man who went to build the bigger barns.
Yeah, good point. And you take that with the parable of the talents. I mean, you had the one talent man that didn't do anything. But you had the other two men, even though they didn't own the property, they knew their master was a strict individual, and they went out and they made a profit with what they were given. As a result, they were rewarded for what they were given. And same thing today. Some of us have more than others. And the question is, do we use it in the proper way? Elon Musk, as you probably know, has now been known as the first trillionaire. I had no idea what $1 trillion looks like. I don't even know how many zeros that is. And I don't know what Elon Musk does with all his money. I do know that he uses some of it generously to help people. But if you look at the socialist attitude, they would take it all away from Elon Musk and give it to the poor. And what do you think the poor is going to do with it?
They're the poor.
Yeah, they're going to go out and just buy everything. And pretty soon they're going to be poor, and they're going to say, we need more. We need more.
But it's buy everything, but it started with a bottle of whiskey.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. When we get into the topic that I'm going to get into after we finish Joe, be all you can be. I think it's John said that's a military term. And it is. That was their quote, be all you can be. But we'll have 12 lessons on it. And one of the things we'll talk about is the fact that we need to recognize the possessions that we have and not try to build up those possessions, but recognize that there are other people who have need and help when we can. We see these people on the street all the time, always begging for money. And many of them, you see they're able to walk with no problem. And there are jobs available. The unemployment rate here in Oklahoma is 5.4%. So there are jobs available for them. So why don't they want to work? And I don't have the answer for it, but part of it is, as long as they don't work, they can get all the money they need, they don't pay any taxes. They get free health care, free dental, because all they have to do is go to these free clinics, and they get that. They'll get free eyewear, they'll get free hearing aids if they need that. They get everything they need. And they're happy with what they have. And all they want to make is somewhere between $40 to maybe $100 a day. And that's why they walk the streets.
Freeloaders.
Huh?
They're freeloaders.
Well, they are freeloaders. But anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more because I think the Bible is very specific in who we should help and who we should not help. But getting back to Zophar here, he's saying that Job got all this stuff and he's not helping anybody. He actually stole it from the poor. They refused to acknowledge the fact that he was indeed helping a lot of people. But as we talked about in the 19th chapter, even his servants are not helping him. And his wife is not helping him. They've all kind of abandoned him at this point. So, verse 19 says, "For he has oppressed and forsaken the poor, he has violently seized a house which he did not build." This was the sin of giants in the Old Testament, in the Old World. As much as any, they bring God's judgment upon nations and families because of their attitude and their approach. So there's a few things here that we can look at. Number one, they're suggesting that, or Zophar is suggesting that Job abandoned or has forsaken the poor. He's not taking care of them. He's not showing any kindness towards them. And he's not making any provision for them. Which that's not true. You go to the first few chapters and Job was indeed helping them. The second thing that Zophar is basically expressing is he has oppressed or crushed and exploited these poor people. He has misappropriated funds from the hospital, thereby exacerbating the financial hardships of the impoverished. Number three, he's basically saying he forcibly took their houses without any right. Ahab's seizure of Naboth's vineyard is a good example of that. He used blatant violence rather than deceit or legal manipulation. Look at verse 20. He says, "Because he knows no quietness in his heart, he will not save anything he desires. Nothing is left for him to eat. Therefore his well-being will not last. In his self-sufficiency he will be in distress. Every hand of misery will come against him." So Zophar is saying, Job, you can't possibly be happy at this point. And at this point I would kind of agree. If you're suffering the way Job is suffering, you wouldn't be very happy either, would you? Because at this point Job doesn't really understand why he's suffering the way he's suffering. So yeah, he's probably not very happy. Verse 21, Zophar is basically saying, you greedily consumed all of what you had. None was left for anyone else. You're on a downward spiral. This is all because Job lost everything he had. So Zophar is saying you're on a downward spiral now because you don't have anything left. Everything's gone. So in verse 22, he's pointing out that people will pursue you at your peak. The greatest fullness that you can suppose him to regain of worldly goods, the more he shall be distressed. For the hand of every man whom he had afflicted shall lay hold on him to demand satisfaction. Any comments through verse 22? All right. Let's look at a little bit more here then. So, verse 23. When he is about to fill his stomach, God will cast on him the fury of his wrath, and he will rain it on him while he is eating. He will flee from the iron weapon. A bronze bow will pierce him through. It is drawn and comes out of the body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his gall. Terrors come upon him. Total darkness is reserved for his treasures. An unfanned fire will consume him. It shall go ill with him who is left in his tent. All right, so let's look at that for a moment. So Zophar is describing here the many embarrassments and vexations which commonly attend or occur for the wicked and their practices. So he's saying, this is the utter ruin for you. verse 23, God will satisfy your appetite, but by raining his burning anger into your body. Rain. Look at that verse 23 again. He says, when he is about to fill his stomach, God will cast on him the fury of his wrath and will rain it on him while he is eating. I want you to notice that verse, or that word rain. This phrase denotes both the author of his plagues, which is God, and the nature and quality of them, that they shall come upon him like rain, so that he cannot prevent or avoid it. Well, he's already suffering. So Zophar is basically saying, God has rained all this suffering upon you. And then you see that word eating. He points out that as it fell upon thy sons. So Zophar argues then that Job's sores prove his point. This is why you have all those boils on your body. In verses 24 through 26, he's basically saying he will die a nasty death and be devoured. His riches will have no future. Well, he doesn't have any riches anymore, does he? When he desires and hopes to avoid a lesser danger, he shall fall into a greater danger. And though he should draw the shaft out of his body, and the wound in his bowels should be healed, he shall not escape, for terror shall perpetually accompany him. So Zophar is basically saying nothing but dreadful danger shall await for him. Verse 27, heaven and earth will be witnesses and pursuers of him. Look at that. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will depart, and his goods will flow away in the days of his wrath. This is a portion from God for a wicked man, the heritage appointed to him by God. So in these last few verses, Zophar is basically saying heaven and earth, they're going to be witnesses and pursuers of Job. Some of Job's possessions were carried away. His posterity will be rooted out. The increase of his house shall either be cut off by untimely death or forced to run their country. Numerous and growing families, if wicked and vile, are soon reduced and dispersed by the judgments of God. His goods shall flow away from his family as fast as they flowed into it. When the day of God's wrath comes, for which all the while his estate was in the getting by fraud and oppression. Here again, he's suggesting that Job acquired all this by basically stealing it from the poor. So in verse 29, Zophar declares his speech to have God's endorsement behind it. Look at that again. This is the portion from God for a wicked man, his heritage appointed to him by God. You see, Zophar is basically saying, God spoke to me. And I'm just telling you what God had to say. Any comments through verse 29?
That goes back.
Yes. No.
Verse 3. 3.
Uh-huh.
He had started off with stating this is what was going to be happening, this kind of individual.
Right.
Sometimes I wonder what God would say to me if he was speaking.
Well, I suspect that God will probably tell me on the judgment day, Dale, you made some significant mistakes in your life, but I have forgiven you because you have asked for forgiveness. And you have straightened up your life where you're making an effort to improve upon what I have instructed you. Well, I think that's probably the case with most of us. None of us are perfect. And we've all made mistakes. Yes.
I remember in the class, the statement was made, I hope I'm going to heaven. And the preacher made it quite clear. You don't hope that at all. You are working towards that, and that will be your reward. That's the difference.
That's a common answer though. I hope. You don't have a hope.
Yeah. You know, I appreciate what you're saying there, what most of you are saying. I struggle with that. When you ask someone if they're going to heaven, and I'm talking about a Christian, and even non-Christians will use that phrase, I hope. But a Christian should never use the phrase, I hope I'm going. Because we either know or we don't know. If we know we're living a life that is not in accordance with God's Word, then hope is not a strategy. Yes, Marcel?
Well, because didn't Peter say, make your calling and election sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had a comment, Kathy?
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? All right, well, the second bell's got the ring and everything, but we'll look at chapter 21 next week. And I just want to go back and refer you to chapters 13 through 20. Because what we see in those chapters that we've looked at so far is Job's friends used his own arguments against him. In the first cycle, they each made their own points, which they had probably, as I've suggested, concluded in their own thoughts and their talks with each other on their way to visit with Job, okay? So they have shifted to remembering things that he says throughout his speeches. They use some of his own words against him is what they're doing. And Job responds to Zophar at this point, focusing less on his suffering and more on the broader debate with his friends, since they showed no sympathy for his complaints. And they argued that outward prosperity and his continuation could indicate membership in the true church, suggesting that the loss of prosperity proves hypocrisy, even without additional evidence. So Job is disagreeing with this assertion. And that's what we're going to see next week, okay? In fact, in verses 1 through 6, Job recommends both his case and his discourse, is what we'll look at, all right? I don't think we'll have time to look at that, but I would just mention verse 1. He says, Then Job answered and said, Listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your consolation. So this is what we're going to see out of Job, okay? All right, appreciate your comments this morning.